and good morning, everyone. Welcome to part 2 in our series on combination products. As Nicholas mentioned, today we're going to focus on considerations for delivery device companies. Next slide. So we're assuming that you've developed a drug delivery device that in theory could deliver several different drugs. And we've included here some of these drug delivery device examples here. And now you're wondering, what is next? How do you market your device in the US? Do you really need a pharma partner? There's numerous other questions. So next slide. So today we're going to focus on a few of these considerations. First, the pre-market regulatory pathway considerations, integration considerations for the drug or biologic in the device, the drug constituent part, how to kind of sell your device to the drug company, and partnership considerations included in that. And then finally, the post-market regulatory considerations. Next slide. So let's start with the pre-market regulatory considerations. So some drug delivery products are regulated as medical devices. And as an example, these are general purpose delivery devices like syringes, also devices that are used for the delivery of approved drugs, where the approval or clearance of the device wouldn't impact the way that the drug is used or the drug's approved labeling. So, for example, a nebulizer for albuterol delivery, generally albuterol is already indicated for, in its approved labeling for delivery through nebulization. So the nebulizer itself, unless it has some very unique technological characteristics, would typically be regulated as a medical device alone by CDRH. And on the other hand, if the device is delivering a novel drug or biologic, or the use of the device with the drug would require a change to the drug or biologic's approved label, then the combination of the drug and the device would be regulated as a combination product. In general, each use of the device constituent is reviewed in the context of the drug or biologic to be delivered and its indication for use. In these situations where there's a novel drug or an approved drug or biologic the label would need to be updated for use with the device. The drug or biologic is still seen as the primary mode of action, and typically the product is then therefore regulated by CDER or CBER with an FDA. Next slide. So just as a reminder, a combination product is a product composed of any combination of a drug and a device, a biologic and a device, or a drug and a biologic, or a drug, device, and biologic. And this definition includes, previous slide. This definition includes cross-labeled combination products where a device is packaged separately, but according to its label, it would be intended for use only with a specific approved drug. And both of the drug and the device products would need to be used together. So even if you have a drug that's technically sold, or a device and a drug that are technically sold separately, they can still be viewed as a combination product. Next slide. So as mentioned before, the combination product is assigned to a lead center at FDA based on its primary mode of action. And for drug delivery devices, the primary mode of action is typically the drug or biologic, and FDA prefers a single marketing application based on the primary mode of action. But if you would like to get your device approved separately, that may be a possibility, and that's something you could discuss with FDA. But it is also important to know that FDA will not approve a device if there is no, they won't approve the device separately if there's no approved drug on the market that it could be used with. Next slide. So if you'd like to approach FDA to discuss device-related product, combination product questions or concerns, you typically need to approach CDER or CBER, as they're typically going to be the lead center, and you'd need to use their meeting mechanisms. And that means that because the drug is the primary mode of action, you would already need to have a pharma partner on board, and they would likely need to lead the discussion. I do want to point out, though, that that CDRH has expressed openness to discuss device-related issues if you have a novel, very complex device, and if you have specific questions that are solely related to the device, that don't depend on the drug being delivered, then it may be possible to approach CDRH in a pre-submission. Also, just to note that there are also these combination product agreement meetings for any disagreements that can't be resolved through the typical meeting pathways. But this meeting mechanism has very rarely been used. Next slide. So once you're at a stage where you already have the pharma partner, or you have that novel complex design that allows you to go straight to CDRH, you can approach FDA with questions related to any of these aspects related to your design, biocomp, sterilization, cleaning, packaging and shelf life, the delivery performance, human factors, etc. And as applicable, these are the device areas that FDA will want to see safety and effectiveness addressed for the device constituent part. Next slide. But before you get there, you'll need to fully define the partnership with your pharma partner. You'll need to decide how much information you're willing to share with that pharma partner and understand how much information they're going to be sharing with you. If there's IP you would like to protect, you may want to submit a DMF, device master file, to CDER or CBER that would contain your V&V information and device-specific information, and then you would let FDA access this DMF when reviewing your pharma partner submission. So that way, your device information is kind of split a bit from the pharma partner's submission information. On the other hand, if there's device information that's going to be included in the pharma partner's submission, you'll need to either include that device information in Module 3, 3.2R most likely, and then human factors information would be included in Module 5. If there is a single marketing application, you'll want to work with the pharma partner to address any device-related deficiencies that come back from FDA. And this is kind of an area where working with a consulting firm can help both parties while maintaining some confidentiality regarding your IP. Next slide. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Christina Vesely, to talk about integration considerations.
Thank you. We can jump right into this. So the first thing to think about when you're talking about your drug device combination product is what components are you using? And maybe you've already manufactured your device, maybe you already have your prototype in mind. But as you start thinking about some of these other aspects, you may have to make some changes because there may be specific incompatibilities related to the drug or the device components. So things to think about, first of all, would be what is the category of drug? Are you working with a small molecule or a biologic of some sort? Some of the small molecules that are on the market may be reactive with some of the components that you are intending to have in your device. The formulation is something we also need to take into consideration. Aspects of formulation that are particularly critical would be your pH of your solution. Some of the excipients you may have may interact with product component surfaces, or if you have other known incompatibilities between some of those formulation components and specific aspects of your device, that would be something you need to be aware of. We need to think about what volume and what concentration the product is going to be at during dosing and how we're going to administer the product. Is this intended to be an IV administration? Is there a reason this needs to be subcutaneous or via some other administration route? And how much time is it going to take to administer the product? Is this a simple injection where it's going to be over in a couple of seconds? Or are we talking about something that's going to have a longer residence time in our device and or on the person's body, but otherwise out of refrigeration? And then finally, is this something that a clinician is going to administer to the patient, or is the patient going to have to administer this to themselves? You've probably taken into account to some degree those aspects as you were designing your product. But again, depending on what that drug is that you're actually going to be delivering, that may change how you approach that. Other things that must be taken into account would be quality of components. We know that there are certain tubings that tend to shed particles, and if you're looking at any sort of parenteral administration, that can be problematic. The availability of components is another big one that sometimes people forget about, uh, especially in, on the back end of the COVID era where we had a lot of supply chain constraints. Making sure that we're able to get the components we need is going to be important. And then making sure you have good vendors and partners, especially if you have a device where you are manufacturing with the drug, making sure that you have the ability to manufacture that successfully, that you can get the manufacturing time, etc. Next slide, please. And then, talking a little bit more about material compatibility. So we're looking here to show that we have a lack of interaction between our drug and the device. And this needs to be performed in a manner that is reflective of our actual intended use and or storage conditions. We need to be thinking about the chemical and physical incompatibilities that we may have with our active product. Specifically from a chemistry perspective, we need to know if we have any new impurities or increased rates of formation of impurities compared to the drug that's manufactured maybe in a vial. As an example, we know that proteins tend to aggregate in the presence of silicon oil or certain metals, and so that's something else we would need to be specifically looking for. If we have materials that are going to cause the drug to adsorb to the surface of those materials, that would impact our dosing of the product, and so we would want to avoid that, and we may have to have certain mitigation strategies to just deal with that piece. And then another key point is we want to make sure that the device is going to perform consistently across shelf life. And so maybe as a device manufacturer, you could say, well, my device is set up that it's going to be consistent, it's going to be good for multiple years, we don't expect any issues. However, if you have a drug product that you're working with that is going to change viscosity over time, that may impact the device performance. So you have to be aware of those pieces. Other things we need to think about from material compatibility perspective would be our extractables and leachables profiles. Determining what our analytical evaluation thresholds will be, that's based primarily on the dosing and the volumes that are going to be administered. Safety evaluation of any species that we find that are above the analytical evaluation threshold, and then how we're going to mitigate that. And kind of going back to that previous conversation about the drug and the excipients, sometimes our drugs can actually cause the extractables to come out of the components. And then there are certain things that we put in our formulations that may do the same. Surfactants tend to increase extractables and leachables coming out of the products. Next slide, please. And so this is a big question. The drugs, the selling of the device to the drug company is a question that I get a lot. So I've had different manufacturers with different platform devices come to me and say, "Well, we really want to get our device on the market. How do we attract a pharma client or partner?" And as we go into the next slide, I'll talk about why sometimes the drug companies drag their feet a little bit in making that decision. So the biggest issue is that as a drug manufacturer, especially if you've already got your product in a vial and it's in a configuration that you're comfortable with, the idea of incorporating a device with that in inherently requires a higher level of complexity in our drug development process. This may result in increased costs because we may have to do additional studies to support the device is compatible with the product. We may need to now be looking at specialty manufacturers who are able to work with the drug and that particular device. Or if we have a device that's going to be marketed with the drug in a vial, now we have to have kitting considerations. And so this just increases what we need to pay for from that pharma side. This may also increase our development timelines. As an example, if you have a drug that you've been working on for years that's marketed or that's delivered in a vial, and we now want to move this over to something simple like a pre-filled syringe, that's probably at least a 2-year process to even get those studies going, get your manufacturers lined up, get things into a good place from a GMP perspective. And then after all that happens, now we have to look at stability and we have to have a certain amount of shelf life demonstrated before we could successfully market that. So that's part of the increased timelines. Now, granted, it's a little simpler if you're talking about a device where you have your drug product in a vial and then you're going to combine it with the device at the point of use, but you can still see that there's going to be some potential increase just based on the number of studies we're going to have to do. And then at the end of the day, we also have less certainty that the agency is going to accept our product in this new device. We're going to have a higher bar put on us in terms of demonstrating the accuracy of the dose. Again, not just at the time that we make the device, but over time, especially if our product is in contact with the device over a long term. And there's always going to be the question of, do I need to have additional PK studies to support the use of this device? Again, with that pre-filled syringe example, that's an automatic question. If I now have this in a device, is the accuracy going to be the same as it was when I had the product in a vial? Especially if I'm moving to something more complex like a pump, where maybe I'm delivering over a longer time or something else that may necessitate additional studies. And so, what is it that motivates? If sorry, let's stay on that. Thank you. So what is it that motivates the drug company to actually incorporate the device to get over some of these barriers? Some of the key points are going to be having some sort of a marketing advantage over a competing product. So if you have a competitor that already has a device with their product and you don't have one with yours, then you are at a marketing disadvantage. Part of this is going to relate to convenience to patients. And then another motivation might just be making sure that you're able to target delivery as intended. So let's say that you have something that needs to be delivered subcutaneously, but the volumes required are outside the range that we would have for a typical pre-filled syringe or even a syringe in a vial with a vial. That might motivate you to some of these on-body devices, other specialty devices. And if all of these combined together result in a significant improvement to the drug delivery and or the patient outcomes, that's also going to be motivating, especially if we're at a point where we need that extra edge in order to convince an agency that they should approve our product. So now moving to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to get into a couple case studies here. So we'll start with an example of an on-body injector, and I want to talk through some of the motivations and some of the challenges here. So on-body injectors are a great option for delivering some of these increased volumes of liquid or providing multiple doses of a product over time without requiring separate injection events for the patient. From a CMC perspective, there are a bunch of challenges that come with it. First of all, our active pharmaceutical ingredient will be exposed to different temperatures And those temperatures are going to range between ambient temperature, whatever the temperature is in the room, all the way up to body temperature, because we have this product now that is directly in contact with the body. And so we need to make sure that our product is stable enough um, to be held at that worst case temperature condition for the duration of the delivery of the product. Also, the API is going to be in contact with the device for that entire period. So again, our material compatibility studies need to evaluate what is the actual in-use condition, make sure that we're also evaluating extractables and leachables, especially for something that's going to be in contact with that device for more than a couple of hours. And all of this assumes that we have our drug in a vial or cartridge that is used to fill a reservoir immediately prior to administration. If we have a product where we're filling it as part of our manufacturing process and then selling this as a filled device, that changes also how we're going to evaluate those components. And then another piece of this, of course, is the precision of our dose delivery. We need to make sure we are specifically calibrating our devices to the active pharmaceutical ingredient that we're intending to be delivering to make sure that we have good dose accuracy, regardless of viscosity or other product specific parameters. Moving to our next case study, we'll use the example of a transdermal patch. Transdermal patches are a great idea from the patient perspective because they're easy to use. They don't require us to give ourselves an injection, and we may even be able to get a benefit of a sustained release from this type of device. However, the challenges from the CMC perspective, first of all, we know we're now going to be exposing that active pharmaceutical ingredient to body temp throughout the duration of the delivery. So we need a product that's stable under whatever conditions we formulated and manufactured under. Speaking of formulation, we need to make sure that that formulation is consistent with the dosage form. And so again, thinking of that example where we have our drug product as a liquid in a vial, we may need to do a complete reformulation to get this into a configuration that is compatible with that patch. And then we may also need to include additional formulation components to facilitate permeability of the drug through the skin. So those are other challenges we have to work on. And then there's also the possibility of delivery site reactions. We need to remember the product is now going to be in contact with the skin so for somewhere between hours and days. And if the API that we're using or the excipients are irritating to the skin and it causes some sort of reaction, that's going to decrease the probability of patient compliance with this product. And it's also going to decrease the probability that the patient's even willing to work with this program. Moving on to our next example, nebulizers. Nebulizers are great for delivering medications through the respiratory tract. And when if you ever use a nebulizer, it's not as though you feel as if you're taking in a hot liquid or a hot gas. This feels like it's very normal, but there's two different things that happen related to thermal stress during delivery with a nebulizer. Depending on the type of nebulizer you're using. There can be a cooling effect with jet nebulization. The temperatures at the outlet can decrease by more than 10 degrees C, depending on the type and operating conditions. On the other hand, there may be a heating effect. If you have a vibrating mesh nebulizer, you may see increases in temperatures up to 40 degrees toward the end of nebulization. Longer nebulization times can lead to greater temperature changes, and that can impact the stability of the drug product. Also, the physical properties of the drug solution itself can influence the heat generation and dissipation, so that can make it even worse. And I've seen with delivery of some proteins, there's a probability of particle generation, aggregation that is associated with that. So that's something to think about as well. And then the other issue that we have from the CMC side, if we're going to go from a sub-Q or an IV injection to now administration through the respiratory tract, is that the excipients that I had in that drug product in the vial may not be compatible with this administration route. Anytime you're doing pulmonary delivery, you have a very limited set of excipients you can choose from. And also the pulmonary delivery route has an increased potential for immunogenicity. So again, as that drug company, I've got a couple additional things that I now need to be worried about in terms of acceptance of the product by the agency. We can move to the next slide. So as the device company, how do I overcome these challenges and convince the drug company that they actually want to work with my device? And the long story short, I need to make sure that I have communicated to the drug company that the benefits of incorporating the device are going to outweigh the risk to the drug company. I need to be able to demonstrate to them what the benefits are. And a lot of times that may mean that as the device company, I'm going to need to perform some of these preliminary studies at a very low cost to get the drug company interested. And this is especially true if I have a product that has never been marketed previously, that nobody's familiar with. I need to show them how this is going to work. I need to show how this can be implemented, and I need to show them upfront what are the challenges and how are they going to overcome those challenges. It's also good as the device company if you have an understanding of what the competitive landscape is for the product that you're trying to attract. For example, if you're talking to someone that's got their drug product in a vial and they have no real competition out there, patient compliance and patient outcomes are good, they don't have a lot of motivation to move to a device that's just going to add complexity to their program. You would be better off working with someone that does have more competition out there, that has more motivation from that perspective. Moving to the next slide. What additional challenges do we have as we talk about combination product development with these specialty devices? Extractables and leachables assessments are a big part of your device manufacturing. All of your components of your device have to be assessed for extractables and leachables. This includes the device itself and any product contact surfaces. You also need to take into consideration any tubings, IV bags, syringes, or other components that you need to get the drug into the device. The assessment period for extractables and leachables needs to cover your anticipated contact period for your product with the device. Endotoxins. I've actually seen a couple people get tripped up on this one. All components of your device must be assessed for endotoxins, not just the device, but also the product itself, because the total allowable endotoxin levels is going to be defined based on the potential exposure to patients that occurs with delivery of the product. And some of the sources of endotoxin that you're going to have to worry about might actually surprise you. For example, if you have a large volume of drug product that you're going to dilute a small volume into a large volume of saline, for example, and that's going to be delivered through your pump or whatever other device. You need to take into account the endotoxin contribution from that saline diluent as well as the drug and all of your device components. So since these are additive, sometimes those numbers can get very large and surprisingly so. Moving to the next slide, component sterilization. So there are a lot of different methods out there for sterilizing our devices. But these sterilization methods may or may not be compatible with all of your device components. Some of our plastics or rubber components may depolymerize under gamma irradiation, which would impact performance in our extractables and leachables profiles. We may also see additional peaks cropping up in our drug product purity assessments because of these things that are coming out of the plastics or rubber. Other sterilizations that are particularly concerning, vaporized hydrogen peroxide is used. It's great for getting all surfaces, but this is a strong oxidizer, and if you have metal components, they may be damaged in that process. UV sterilization, this is another potential for damaging some of our plastic components. And so you may find yourself in a situation where you have to sterilize different components with different techniques. And if that's the case, then when you bring all of these back together, you need to assure that you are maintaining sterility during assembly. And this takes the simple perspective of a device that's going to be completely separate from the drug. If we now have a drug that's going to be incorporated into the device and that's how it's going to be marketed, the sterilization can become even more complex because a lot of our drug products are not going to be compatible with any of these types of sterilization, especially if you're talking a biologic, in which case you might need to look at aseptic processing once the drug is incorporated, to get the drug incorporated into the product. And so post sterilization of the device, we now have to aseptically process everything forward. The next slide, I guess we are going to move into some of our post-market considerations. So as a note, and I've seen this in a couple cases now, components can change. And you may have your device set up with these tubing kits, these accessories, etc. But if there are components that are not fully under your control, you may find that they are changed by the supplier, and that can happen at any point in the development process or post-marketing. And if that does occur, especially if they have differences in the types of plastics they're using or the sources, then you may need to repeat some of your extractables and leachables assessments. And even if you don't necessarily have a difference in the component, I've seen situations where we switch from one glass manufacturer to another glass manufacturer, and that may also impact some of the extractables that come out of that material. And so you still have to potentially do more extractables and leachables assessments in order to enable the use of that component that has changed. We need to think again about material compatibility, same thing. If we have a difference in the plastics that are used or some of these other components or quality of the components, that could result in additional interaction with our drug product. The next slide, please. I'm actually going to turn this back over to Anshul for this, if you don't mind.
Sure. So as part of the post-market responsibilities, adverse event reporting is one of the main things that is required. And for combination products, the type of reporting that's needed is laid out in the regulation in 21 CFR 4. Basically, there are reporting requirements for both the constituent parts, so the device constituent and the drug constituent, as well as the combination product as a whole. So products with device constituents must submit 5-day reports if there's something that has led to serious injury or death, malfunction reports, and correction or removal reports. And so it's just good to consider that your pharma partner may request your assistance with the device constituent part investigations and pulling together the reports, even though they ultimately will likely submit them. So figuring out who is responsible for what, even on that post-market side, is important when you're developing that partnership. Next slide. And I'll just... Christy, go ahead.
I'll let you go ahead.
Just to conclude, our drug device combination products offer unique opportunities to serve patients and address clinical needs. However, the regulatory pathways and requirements are different than for typical devices. Typically, most combination products that include delivery devices are going to be drug or biologic led. So as a company, even if you have this platform type device technology that could be used with many different drugs or biologics, you're going to want to start with a single drug partner. And you're going to have to demonstrate why your device has benefits and de-risks the program for the drug company. So in terms of benefits, you'll want to show clinical and marketing and, of course, convenience to patients. That's a big thing that's driving the drug delivery market in general is patient convenience. In terms of risk mitigation, you'll want to understand any compatibility issues, demonstrate that dose accuracy and consistency, that your device can deliver a range of doses that the pharma partner is interested in, and also help that drug company navigate the regulatory pathway in terms of the device needs that will need to be met for the combo product. Next slide. So now we'll go ahead and take any questions. Yeah, so the question is, could you comment on the possibilities of a CBER-led device approval? And yes, everything that we talked about related to possibility for CBER-led devices. We've worked with several companies that have a biologic they're trying to deliver, especially now with gene therapies. So there are multiple CBER-led combination products that incorporate a biologic and a device. For those, it is basically less likely that you're able to rely on any past information with your device. Like the BLAs require everything to kind of stand alone. So more of that device information would either need to be incorporated within the BLA or reference device master file that is really specific to that application. And Chris, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think you've covered it.
May you please share some human factor testing requirements?
Sure. So that is actually going to be a topic for a future webinar because there is a lot to discuss there. At a very high level, you are going to be the sponsor is going to be typically asked for a human factors study with the combination product. So even if your device has been part of a previous approval, FDA is going to want to make sure that the specific drug that is being delivered and the specific user population that's being targeted, that the product is safe for that and effective for that use. So they're going to likely ask for human factors testing, even if you have a prior approval with the same device. The first step I would say is to develop a use-related risk assessment, going through all of the tasks with the use of the device and the specific intended use, and seeing, if there are risks that would translate into critical tasks, where if that task isn't conducted properly, there could be user harm. And if you identify any of these types of critical tasks, that's when FDA definitely would want that human factors testing. We have another question that for devices you mentioned including the information in 3.2R. Have you also had experience in it being included in P7? And is there additional guidance on this? Some of the biocompatibility information, some information can be included in P7. I don't believe there's any formal guidance on this. In general, most of the device information I've seen is included in to our, but you're correct. There are some cases such as biocompatibility where it's included in P7. And then I mentioned human factors is usually included in Module 5. And then we have one more question. For EU, does the device manufacturer need clinical data with the drug to support approval? If so, what kind of data? So I am not an EU expert. Chris, I don't know if you can answer this question.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely answer it from the perspective of any drug that's going to be marketed, incorporated into the device. You would need clinical data because you're talking about something that's in a long-term storage condition in that device. If we're just talking about delivery that is point of care administration into that device, I don't know the answer to that, but we do have other colleagues who could assist with that, and we'd be happy to get that answered for you outside of this webinar. Sorry. The question is, if you have a device such as a syringe and it's manufactured by one company but filled with a drug from another, how do you deal with conflicting company names? So I'm going to take the assumption that you're talking about something where it is filled for long-term storage. Okay, I see. Yes, so the short answer is that the conflicting company names would not really be an issue because you would have a new name to the product. You wouldn't call it a BD sodium chloride syringe. You would call it a sodium chloride syringe for administration. And within that CMC section, you would be describing what are the components of that, what is the source of this sodium chloride solution. You would probably be referencing that DMF, the drug master file for that sodium chloride that is manufactured by Baxter. And similarly with that syringe BD, from BD, you would be cross-referencing all of their information. Depending on how you're marketing this, it would come together in different ways, but presumably it's a new product when it's put together. And I'm not sure if I fully answered that question. If you have a follow-up, feel free to let us know.
Just to confirm, if you have another question, feel free to reach out to Angel and Christine as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. And you are pretty well invited for our upcoming webinars. As I mentioned, we will send you the information directly. So thank you so much. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.